Hey, and welcome to my 805 poster session. I'm Steve Clark. In my work as a learning specialist for the Calgary Board of Education, I've done quite a bit of work with a team around design thinking. And so I called this paper Teacher as Designer, Design Thinking and the Quest to Create Authentic, Meaningful, and Engaging Tasks. I took a deep dive into looking into where design thinking came from, the skills and mindsets it develops, and also where it might go in the future. Something that's really interested me since working in this field a little is that for the world that we live in, we are surrounded by a number of technologies and different kinds of tools that help us learn, that show what we know, and give us the ability to do some amazing things. But in education, we seem to be taking a bit of a turn and going back to some different kind of skills, the skills that we need in order to be successful in today's world. So here's some of the key ideas that I came up with while taking this deep dive. So I started by looking at the design process, which came from designers of mostly products and engineers. They started out by empathizing with the user and finding a problem, and then they needed to, the next stage is defining, so they really take a deep dive into finding the root cause of that issue. They then come up with a bunch of different ideas and ideate, then they build a prototype, and then finally they test it. And this process loops back as they need to. And then IDEO, a global design company, came up with design thinking. And this, rather than a process, was more of a way of being, a way of problem solving and developing the mindsets and skills that come along with it. They went on to call this human-centered design. And so I arranged the icons, the design process icons in this where the empathy is in the center, as that is the most important aspect of human-centered design. And really, the big learning for me was that this is really about developing 21st century skills and mindsets. So these are actually the 9 mindsets that we talk about in the Calgary Board of Education. And they all, you use and come in and out of them when you're in the design process and when you're practicing design thinking. One of the misconceptions with design thinking in education is that it's all about the process and it's a rigid and linear process, whereas actually it's more about being fluid and floating in and out of the different phases of the design thinking process as needed, as long as you're focused on the user needs. Some of the learning I had about myself throughout this self-directed learning project are really around some of those mindsets. I found that I really missed the collaborative part of this. Independently, I think I struggled a little and was thankful when it came to the peer assessment, as it did involve some collaboration. I did have to remind myself to be mindful of the process and keeping the end in mind. And I actually came up with some ideas from a colleague, Tom, who talked about sketchnoting, and so it gave me an idea to sketch out some notes in order of think about what I wanted to share throughout this paper. Iteration, huge in this project. Lots of writing and rewriting, thinking and rethinking of some of the things that I wanted to share. And then being optimistic, of course. It's pretty hard when you're not sure where your thinking is going to stay optimistic. And thought to form, so I had an idea in my head and I just needed to get it out. So it was good to remind myself about that mindset. My 2 biggest takeaways from this process or from this project or this paper were as follows. again, focusing on these different mindsets that I've been really focusing on over the last couple of weeks. Mindful of the process to me is so important. Knowing where you are in the process, thinking ahead, looking back, and then the collaborative piece. I need to collaborate, I need to work with others, and that is something that I always keep in mind when planning, teaching and learning for my students as well. So that brings me to the end of this poster session. I hope it gave you an idea of what my paper's about. Feel free to read it when I share it if you'd like to learn more. Cheers.